Hidden Fire by Rose Mackey, Book 4 in the Under Violet Sun series. The story. So far in the distant future, Earth has exploded into the galaxy and colonized dozens of planets. During the colonization process, humans realized it was easier to genetically engineer the humans to fit a new planet than terraform an entire planet to their needs. This resulted in a diaspora of human template species that worked together as part of an alliance, pooling their shared economic, social, and military power against alien species. The alliance exists to further human interests in a hostile universe and is highly xenophobic. Felosia and Verit are two colonized human planets, each with different matriarchal societies. Felosians are empaths, and the planet has a majority female population. Their few males are cosseted, petted, and adored, but are not viewed as suitable long-term partners. Many of the Felosians have become dissatisfied with this situation and seek longer-term mates of their own, craving the closeness of a pair bond. Verit is also matriarchal, however there are very few females left. Those that are have formed a ruling class, controlling the violent mercenary clans of feline shifter males. Felosia and Verit came together to co-sponsor a new colony they have named Dalat, hoping that finding mates between them may help solve their shared population fertility issues. A small establishment group from both planets, under the command of Cadet Maral, landed to start the colony building phase. It has worked better than either group could have hoped. Despite some initial social friction, the Felosians and Verit colonists blended well, and there have been 2 successful matings already in the first few months. Unfortunately, the colony has been plagued by problems from the start. There have been multiple instances of sabotage both on and off planet, disrupting their supply chains and placing the lives of everyone on the planet in jeopardy. An investigation was undertaken, and evidence was retrieved pointing to another human planet, Svoboda, as the enemy behind it all. Svoboda is male-dominated and has an open policy of resistance against matriarchal cultures. It was discovered that a rare mineral, Zelan, exists on the planet. Zelan is highly valuable. It has never been found in such large quantities before, and when word gets out that Zelan is present, it will change everything. The fledgling colony is entirely unprepared for the onslaught of thieves and pirates that will descend on their little backwater planet. In investigating the Zelan, the colonists also discovered an ancient sentient alien ship, Casti, who bonded psychically with one of the Felosian colonists, Zira. The only thing more prized than Zelan in the galaxy is ancient alien tech. The colonists have had to go to great lengths to keep this under wraps, including keeping an alliance ambassador named MakenRoy as their captive to prevent him from reporting the situation to the alliance. Matters are coming to a head, and whatever is decided will change the power structure of the galaxy forever. Chapter 1 takes place in parallel with the events of Book 3, Wildfire. Chapter 2 picks up immediately after Book 3. Chapter 12, Togetherness. Maral woke feeling refreshed. She was back in the giant bed, snugly warm. For a moment she couldn't remember what had happened at the end of the night. Perhaps she had drank too much. How embarrassing if she'd passed out at her own wedding. She should find out. It all came flooding back. Dunya, Maku, the group. The next thing she realized was that she was not alone in her bed. She tried to roll over but came up against Maku, lying on top of the covers, and snuggled up against her as close as he could get. He mumbled something in his sleep at her movements and wrapped his arm around her waist. His hand came up between her breasts to lie against her heart. "Maku!" she hissed. "Maku!" She tried to move his arm, but it was like trying to move a steel bar. Decided that she was stuck for now, she snuggled down and let herself luxuriate in his embrace and warmth. She had been horrified last night, both at the accusation and then the realization of Dunya's lie. Her anger had detonated, and she had exposed her telepathy publicly. It wasn't advisable, could easily have been done in private, but in her fury to protect Maku, she hadn't been thinking clearly. For a long moment she had been terrified that she had misjudged him, that she had allowed herself to develop feelings for someone capable of something so horrific. But the proving of his innocence had galvanized her feelings into something deeper, hotter. He was hers to mate, to care for, to protect. At some point over the past few days, her care had become so much more. The thought of losing him had sent a sliver of fear into her soul, that even now she felt creeping inside of her. The fear of losing him. He had suddenly become such a vital, needed part of her life. She had tried to tell herself that it was because of the alliance, but in truth it was him, Maku, the arrogant, sneaky, gorgeous asshole, that adored her sass and strength. She nudged herself around until she was on her back. His hand moved proprietarily to her breast, which he cupped and squeezed. "Maku, are you awake?" He squeezed once. "What's wrong?" His voice was drowsy. "Nothing. Just want to make sure you are with me." She pressed a butterfly kiss to his lips and reached down between them and squeezed his hip gently before tracing the waistband of his pants. His fangs flashed in the dim room. "I am awake now, Dusar. You have my full attention." He squeezed the flesh in his hand, massaging the soft mound gently before trailing his talons over her sternum. She sucked in a breath and he froze. "Did I injure you?" She shook her head. "Just very sensitive." She frowned and held up his hands to get a closer look at his talons in the poor light. "Are they longer?" He nodded. "They grow overnight. I must trim them daily." "I see, that'll prove interesting." She returned her attention to his pants, working out the unfamiliar fastening, and helped him shimmy them off, leaving him revealed to her. Her jaw dropped. She wasn't quite sure what she was expecting. She knew that their species, despite vastly different evolutionary cycles, were compatible and similar enough that mating was possible, but that left a lot of room for variation. He was a dark charcoal grey, larger than she expected. His private skin was softer than the rest of his skin and covered in small ridges and bumps. "Tell me what feels good for your people," she commanded as she pressed herself to him. He grinned. "That feels nice. Our skin is not as soft as yours, so you need to be firm. Hard." She dragged her nails down his torso and he shuddered in response. "The ridges are sensitive," he panted. She nodded, paying special attention to them. He groaned in response, clenching her breast reflexively, which had her moaning in turn. He froze. "Sore? No, I like it hard too. Just don't pierce my skin with your talons, unless I tell you." "Understood." He trailed his talons over her skin, leaving delightful imprints of fire. She hissed, "I like the roughness." "Good." He pulled her towards him and took her mouth, delving his tongue inside as he squeezed and massaged, reddening her skin as she flushed. "Your people are colourful in your desire." Using tongue and teeth, he teased her until she screamed, holding her in place with taloned hands while he plundered her, until she squirmed for mercy and collapsed, panting and sweat slick. She grinned. "I see some things are universal." She lavished her love on him, learning his secret places and preferences. She loved it, loved the sense of power and control it gave her, knowing that she delighted him, that she brought him to the edge. MakenRoy, who was so in control all the time, was undone, putty in her hands. She scraped her teeth along the edge of a particularly sensitive ridge, and he froze. "No. Oh, yes." He hauled her up, wrapping his hand around her throat for another drugging kiss, before flipping her over onto her back. He prowled over her, lifting her right leg and wrapping it around his hip and positioning himself over her. In a moment of clarity, he froze. "Are you all right?" she asked. "We have not discussed children. Are you taking a preventative?" She smiled. "I am Philosian. We control when we are fertile. I have no wish for more children at this time, so we are safe." She reached up and pressed another lush kiss to him, tasting herself on his lips. "But thank you for asking." He nodded and they exploded together. After they held each other close, their hearts beating against each other, the sweat cooling in the air of the bedroom. After a few moments, Maral moved to disengage and he gave her a warning squeeze. "Not yet. You need to wait until the ridges retract or it will be painful." "Oh, how long?" He shrugged. "A few minutes, maybe." He grinned. "If you're finished already." She leaned back to look at him. "Aren't you?" He laughed. "Not even close." He reached for trained his claw down her chest, making her shudder. "When the ridges retract, we can continue." He paused. "Unless you are too sore." She laughed and pulled him down to her. "Not at all. I can keep going as long as you can." "That sounds like a challenge, Dusar." The morning sun was warm as she sat on the balcony. He watched her from the kitchen, wondering if he should interrupt or let her be. He had no idea if she was a morning person. His son Hulo appeared from his rooms, blinking owlishly in the daylight. He stopped for a moment when he saw him in the kitchen. "Sire." "Good morning. How did you sleep?" Hulo shrugged and wandered into the kitchen, grabbing the things he needed for his breakfast. "Fine. What time did you come home?" MakenRoy grimaced. "Earlier than we should have. there was some unpleasantness with Dunia. Hulo nodded and took a mouthful of the dried fruit in his bowl. Not surprised, she's mean. MakenRoy stilled. What do you mean? Did she harm you? If she had laid a single finger on his sons, he would hunt her down in her prison and murder her himself. Hulo looked at him warily, sensing his sire's anger. No, but she's mean to people that she thinks can't get back at her. She's never bad to Sardu or I, but I've seen her with others when there are no elders around. It's in her eyes. So perceptive his son was. A true Malurian, waiting and watching, biding his time. That she is, he murmured. She was arrested last night. Hulo's eyes widened. What did she do? MakenRoy huffed. I'll tell you the details another time. Suffice to say it was stupid in the extreme and put her squarely in Maral's sights. He flicked a glance outside at his mate, still watching the sunrise. When Maral decides someone is a threat to her family, nothing will stop her from protecting them. That's as it should be. Hulo nodded approvingly. At such a young age, his world was black and white, the good and the bad. It was a pity that the universe was so rarely that clear. Why are you in here, not out there? Is she mad at you? Did you annoy her already? MakenRoy sent him a dark look for his impudence, but Hulo just took another bite of fruit, unimpressed with his sire's ire. Eventually, MakenRoy sighed, defeated. I don't know whether she is outside because she wants me to join her, or because she wants peace, or because this is a morning ritual for her. Hulo squinted at him. Why don't you ask her? MakenRoy opened his mouth to tell his son that it wasn't that easy when it struck him. It was exactly that easy. It was him, with his adult concerns, making things complicated where they didn't need to be. He shut his mouth and nodded in thanks for the suggestion. Hulo grabbed his bowl and returned to his room, leaving him alone once more. Deciding that most things were better with caffeine, a strange addiction he had picked up while ambassador to the Alliance, he prepared 2 caffeine drinks and walked through the shield window to the balcony. Good morning, Dusar. He handed over a drink to her, which she accepted with a flash of a smile, which deepened when she smelled the brew. Coffee! You're an angel from the goddess! She took a tentative sip, followed by another. May I join you? He asked, feeling foolish and unsure, like a youth. Of course. I try to watch the sunrise whenever I am planetside. It calms me and centers me for the day. She scooted over on the sofa she was sitting on and allowed him to slide in next to her. They sat in companionable silence, just enjoying each other's company and the view of the sun rising over the peaks of Maluriens. Eventually he spoke. He didn't want to break the easy energy they had created, but he had to know. How do you feel this morning? Did I harm you? The last was unspoken, but his mate heard the subtext anyway. I feel good. She reached over and rasped her fingers along a ridge on his jawline, and he closed his eyes in bliss. Better than good. It was fantastic. And to answer the question you didn't ask, it was incredible. And you didn't harm me. I am very much up for a repeat any time. She startled a laugh from him. He never knew what she would say. This boldness about their lovemaking was unexpected. She smiled wryly. What, you think I should be shy? We are too old for that, Maku. I enjoyed last night and hope to enjoy it many times over our mating. I won't dissemble how I feel. He grasped her hand and kissed her fingertips. I am glad, because I feel the same. In fact, were we not on a schedule, I would do my best to convince you to retire to our rooms for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, matters will not wait. What is on the plan for today? We are going to meet the Lauren of the Nuren family to discuss our battle strategy for defending Dalat. Chapter 13. Fly to the Rescue. The Nuren family war room was deep inside the mountain to the east of the Great Plains. It was a large pit ringed with gantries and hanging platforms. The floor of the pit was filled with mimetic sand, its pale white granules able to morph to represent any battlefield. In the hanging platforms, troop commanders sat in circular arrays, surrounded by 360-degree screens where they could control their teams on the battlefields. On the far left, tiers of silver pods lined the walls. Maral walked to the railing to gape at the battle room. It was spectacular, beyond anything she had ever seen in the Alliance. From what she could see, there appeared to be 3 different military engagements currently active. There were nearly 200 people in the room, and it buzzed with their focused energy. It was humbling. Perhaps the Malurian were right. The Alliance's xenophobia had become so pronounced They were cutting themselves off from possible innovations. The universe was a very big place after all, and the human alliance was so very small. Maku gently tugged on Maral's arm and guided her up the entrance steps to the main gallery. She was acutely aware of his presence, like a banked fire by her side. She heated, remembering the feel of his claws dragging over her. When had she become sex-mad? He smiled at her, a broad, knowing look that said that he knew exactly what she was thinking about, and winked. Around a table on the top level of the gallery, 2 Maluriens stood and nodded to them as they arrived. It was Chromu and Jidu, mates to Maku's aunt and mother. Chromu bowed to her politely, and she extended a gentle empathic sense to him, determined to detect if there was any lingering resentment after last night. All she received back was sadness and exhaustion. Jidu, the huge Malurian mated to MakenRoy's mother, stood before a large conference table. Thus far he had been a quiet, solid presence in their family meetings, saying little, observing all. Here he seemed like a different male. This male exuded dominance and was completely at home in the battle room. Maral, this is the battle command center of the Neuron family. You met Jidu. He holds the rank of Lauren. I believe the designation of Lauren is equivalent to the Philosian military cadet designation. He develops our military strategies and controls our high-priority military engagements. He is the one that will plan the defense of Dalat. Jidu nodded at Maral formally, one officer to another. I have heard of your military exploits. I look forward to working with you to defend your planet. He waved them to vacant seats. Here is the situation report as we know it. His hands flew over a floating display and brought up a star map of the area around Dalat colony, with clusters of blue and green dots appearing. Your people have seeded the area around the colony with deep space sensors. They have set up a perimeter with 9 Philosian vessels, under the command of the Philosian Dagger Kiss, and 6 Verit vessels. For a normal small colony it would be more than sufficient. For you, well. He waved his hands in the air, indicating that it was in the hands of the universe. They have already fought off 6 attacks in the past 2 days from small, long-range scouting vessels. The Alliance is testing the defences. He saw Maral tense and quickly added, No casualties so far on your side. He zoomed out on the map, and a cluster of red dots appeared at the edge of the map. The Alliance is massing a fleet to attack. They appear to be calling in reinforcements from the Alliance planets, preparing to attack you for breach of treaty. Maral sucked in a breath. They had known it was a risk, seceding. The Alliance had called their bluff. Your sister is preparing a political countermeasure which she believes will remove most of the Alliance allies, at least in the short term. Jidu paused. She has warned us that this may exchange one problem for another. What is she going to do? Maral was cautious. Amira was brilliant but tended towards big risks with big payoffs. She is going to release all the info your people have collected to the Interstellar News Network. The proof of Svoboda's involvement, Alliance collusion, all of it. There is no way they can do that without word getting out about Zealand as well. Jidu's eyes were troubled. Once the info is out, every sentient race in this part of the universe will descend on Dalat. Her rationale is that the Alliance will leak it anyway, sooner or later, and she would rather control the timing. She will wait until the Alliance ships are massed, so she knows who would have joined them, then release the info. Maral was stunned. It was an incredibly risky move. She saw her sister's reasoning, but nothing would be the same after that. Jidu continued briskly. We cannot reach them before the Alliance fleet arrives. Our best bet will be to trap what remains of the Alliance fleet. Once your sister releases her data, between ourselves and the Verit and Dagger ships already there, we will capture them in a pincer operation. He brought up another view. We have 20 Buzar-class ships ready, each carrying 40 personnel. They are maneuverable, fast, and can take a beating in a flight. His fingers flicked again. We also have 30 Razor-class carriers, each with a full complement of stingers. He glanced at Maral and grinned evilly. That is 200 remote-piloted drones. The pilots work from here. He waved at the edifice of silver pods on the opposite wall. Everyone can be ready to leave tomorrow and be at Dalat within 3 days. Maral nodded, her mind racing at the implications. Thank you. This is incredible. Your actions will save my planet. She swallowed the lump in her throat. This was why she had done this. The blossoming joy she'd found in Maku was a bonus, but this was why she had sacrificed her future. for her people, so they could have this chance. Maku leaned forward, putting his warm hand on the back of her neck. Our planet. You are part of Maluria now, and we defend our own. She nodded, leaning into his warmth, allowing herself to rest for a moment in the safety of his embrace. It struck her that there was nowhere else she felt safer. What do you need from me? She asked. The males exchanged glances before Jiddu shrugged. Nothing, really. We know the details of your colony site from Maku's stay there. She turned a glare on him, and he held up his hands in surrender. You were keeping me hostage. Did you really think I wouldn't take the opportunity to do a little espionage when I was there? Chromu cracked up at his antics, and Maral rolled her eyes in disgust. No, I suppose not. I can't say I'm surprised. I would have done the same in your position. She sighed. So what do we do for 3 days? Maku tugged at her hand and pulled her upright. We rest. Prepare for what is coming. Let me show you a little of Maluria. Her eyes widened. You want me to vacation while my people are defending themselves, fighting for their lives? Would your people benefit if you exhausted yourself? Perhaps if you fasted for 3 days and didn't sleep, they would be warmed by your sacrifice. We could arrange some hot coals for you to walk on too, if that helps. They may even put up a statue or name a school after you in your martyrdom. She growled at him and smacked his bicep. Enough, enough, I get it. I'm being silly. He leaned down, getting into her space, and gently nuzzled her temple. Of course, if you don't want to see my planet, we could just stay in bed for the next 3 days. He bit the shell of her ear. You can growl at me again. I like it. Her pulse shot up into the stratosphere. It sounds terrible. I'll suffer every minute. You are indeed a martyr to suffer so for your people. He leaned into her further, pressing his face against her neck. They were interrupted by a polite cough. They looked over to see Chromu and Jiddu standing there, trying hard not to laugh. Caught by surprise, Maral buried her face in Maku's chest. She had been so caught up in their newfound heat, she had completely forgotten about their audience. Maku responded smoothly. Please excuse us. If you have no more need of us, we have matters elsewhere that need our attention. Chromu was overcome with a mysterious fit of coughing that required him to turn his back on them for a moment, and Jiddu nodded sagely. Of course, your graces, have a lovely day. He turned away and clapped Chromu on the back as they wandered off. Maral groaned and covered her face. I can never look at them again. Just wait until the next family dinner. Now that's just mean. He took her hand and gently kissed her fingertips. She noticed he enjoyed doing that. The offer stands. Would you like to see some more of Maluria? His eyes darkened. Or return to the apartment? Maral considered. The apartment had appeal for sure. She would love to spend a couple of days lazing around in bed, but was that all she wanted? Was that the only depth to their relationship? Friends with benefits? Allies in this war? Or was there something more? She considered him, patiently waiting for her decision. A male of duty and loyalty, intelligence and respect, lots to admire and appreciate. Their connection was undeniable, electric. If she didn't give this fragile connection between them space to grow, she would never know if there was the possibility of something deeper that could grow. The tantalizing possibility of their connection was terrifying. She had never in 70 years let herself consider the possibility of someone like Maku. Maral took a deep breath and stuffed her fears away. She would not allow terror to rob her of the promise she sensed. She smiled and squeezed his hand. Show me your home, Maku. Take me somewhere that is special to you. He smiled, his eyes crinkling with delight. As the Dusar commands. Do you fancy some shopping? Maral's jaw dropped, and she was speechless for a moment. Of all the things I thought you might say, that was nowhere near the top of the list. The market was gorgeous. It sprawled through the town, spilling out into the open pasture land around it. Maku had taken them to this town on his private flyer, pointing out the sights as he did. She had to admit she was charmed. The Malurian here were very different from those she had met in the royal city. These people were traders, artisans and teachers. The markets were a riot of colours, sounds and smells. Stallholders yelled, music blared, and people danced in the streets. It was dizzying. It's beautiful, she exclaimed, her eyes darting from site to site, trying to look everywhere at once. Maku beamed at her. Here, try this. He offered her a small cone containing a pale blue substance and a spoon. She dutifully tasted it, and it exploded in her mouth. "Goddess, whatever that is, I'm going to need it by the shuttle full before we leave." He laughed. "It is a creamed fruit. It's a dessert many parents make for their children." Maku led her down one of the offshoots from the primary artery of the market into a smaller craft area. Maral stopped at a jewellery stall, examining a finely wrought piece, trying to work out what it was for. Behind the stall, an earnest young female stood. Beyond her, in the cool interior, Maral could make out two others working on their pieces. Maral smiled at the young female and pointed to the dark gold item she had seen. It seemed to be a necklace or headdress of some kind, fine chain links dotted with green crystal chips, but she couldn't work out how to get it on. It was truly stunning. The lines of Malurian design were there, evident in the dark, strong colours and rough edges. It spoke to her in a way that adornments rarely did. It was beautiful, but not fragile. "Excuse me, what is this piece? It is beautiful." The stallholder smiled shyly, then picked up the lattice. She held it above her head and carefully draped it over her bald, ridged head and horns. It framed them in shimmering gold and emerald. "Ah, I understand, thank you." Maral smiled at the female. "I don't think that one's for me, such a shame." She gave it a wistful glance. "It's a stunning design." The young female held up her hand for a moment, darting inside the shop and engaging in a rapid, whispered conversation. After a few seconds, an ancient Malurian emerged. Her skin bore deep ridges, and her right horn was broken almost down to her skull. Still, her eyes were sharp. "We can make one for you, for your size." She reached up to touch Maral's hair, and Maku hissed, gripping the elder's hand. "No touching." The hiss descended into a warning rattle deep in his chest. The elder froze for a moment, her eyes widening when she took in Maku's face and robes. Maral saw the moment it dawned on her who he was. "Your Grace, forgive me." The elder bowed her head, hissing at the young one to do the same. "It's all right." Maral patted Maku's arm, gently removing his hold on the elder's wrist. "Why do you need to touch me?" The elder wet her lips, anxiously looking between Maku and Maral. "To measure. We can make the design for you as a diadem." Maral nodded, smiling encouragingly. "You have my permission." She flicked a glance at Maku, who stood beside her, face thunderous. "But go slow, and if you need to do anything else, tell us first." The elder nodded again, and gingerly held a device up to Maral's head. It beeped, and after a moment the elder moved away. "It will be ready in another day." Maku spoke, his voice still low and rumbling, a hair's breadth from violence. "Have it sent to my apartments in the Royal Mountain along with the bill." "Yes, Your Grace." The elder bowed her head. "Thank you. It's a beautiful piece. I will be proud to wear it." The elder smiled widely at that. "Tell them you got it from the heart of the mountain artificer, Dusar, and we will be most appreciative." Maral laughed and agreed. As they continued their wandering, she sensed Maku stealing glances at her. "Say it." "What?" "Whatever it is you want to say. Something is chewing at you." She nudged his shoulder. "You know that you have probably just changed that family's fortune forever." "How so?" "Families wait years for the chance to make jewellery for the royal family. You are a Dusar now. Once word gets out that you have worn their jewellery, everyone will want a piece from there. Minor nobility, merchants, commoners. It is not a style currently worn in the royal palace, and you are a new royal. Within a month it'll be everywhere in the palace. I guarantee this encounter will support that family for the next 2 generations. Maral stopped dead in her tracks. It was too much to wrap her head around. "That's ridiculous," Maku shrugged. "That's the empire. The royal family are its core, and we set the prevailing trends and values." He shrugged again and tugged her gently into continuing to walk. "For good or ill, the empire looks to us for guidance. It's why we police our own so heavily. We must set an example for our people." Maral pondered. It certainly threw Dunia's behaviour into a different light as well. It explained why even the accusation against MakenRoy would have been enough. They continued walking, stopping at spice stalls which made her sneeze in their pungency. More local artisans, high-tech gadgetry, and more. Through it all, Maku made her laugh with his quiet quips, and loomed nearby as she haggled with the stallholders. It certainly added extra zing to her negotiations. Mid-afternoon they emerged into the centre of the market, where little outdoor tables under shade sails had been set up around an amphitheatre at one end. They took a seat at a table on the far left, and a server bustled up to them. "Menu today is roast seasonal vegetables and sliced varian, followed by sweet pastry." Maku ordered them 2 helpings, and the server returned with their eating utensils and a large bottle of pale liquid. After a tentative sniff, Maral found it to be a light tart alcohol. She poured them each a small glass and relaxed into the afternoon. She couldn't remember the last time she just relaxed in the sunshine. They chatted about everything and nothing. Maku regaled her with tales of growing up on Maluria. He told of running wild with his cousins through the royal palace caverns, causing havoc. She told him about growing up on Phalosia, of surfing black sand dunes with her twin. It was easy. The conversation flowed back and forth. They sat there as the afternoon turned into the evening, eating the delicious food and drinking the green drink. When the sky dimmed, lights in the auditorium came on, and a small band took over the stage. "What music will they play?" she asked. He grinned. "Malurian folk, there will be dancing if you'd like to try." Maral laughed, delighted. "Do you dance?" He winked at her. "All Malurian dance." "Can I learn?" His eyes heated. "I'll teach you. Don't worry about getting it right, everyone dances." And so they did. As the band played and the crowd finished eating, the staff cleared the tables away and they took to the dance floor. Maral could see what he meant about not fearing a misstep. While the dance was fast-paced, it was simple. The younger couples in the middle added intricate steps to the reels, but there were just as many older couples on the edges dancing their own slow moves, and children running throughout the crowd, causing joyful chaos. Maku ran her through the steps, and they joined one of the younger groups as they whirled and reeled. As a date, it was pretty much perfect. Maral refused to allow fear to enter into her mind. Tonight was about hope, possibility, and for the first time in years she was free to explore the sensual side of her nature. Explore this one thing with dazzling, incomprehensible promise as they danced and kissed under the stars, like the dozens of other couples around them. Later that night, they returned to their apartments, dizzy from the wine and the whirling. Maral walked into the apartment and flopped on the couch, face first, groaning. "My feet are killing me. I haven't danced that much in years." Maku laughed. "Poor Kadek, I've tired you out. Just leave me here, I'm done. I'll roll myself into bed when I can move again." "Well, we can't have that." He bent down and scooped her up, laughing at her startled squawk. "Put me down." "Why?" He looked down at her face, amazingly familiar to him now after just a few days. "Because I have legs and can walk myself." He looked down at her, all smug arrogance. "But I don't want you to." "I see. What about your sons?" He grinned broadly. "They sought permission to attend a sleepover at a friend's house. It's just the 2 of us." "Fine," she mock-snarled. "Carry me to my bed," she ordered. "Oh no, Dusar, I'm not carrying you to your bed." He pitched his voice low, intimate. He desperately wanted her in his bed. Throughout the date, he had built a list of elaborate fantasies of what he would do with her. It had been the only way to convince himself not to drag her home earlier, and he hadn't wanted to tarnish her unadulterated joy at their outing. He was learning the female behind her Kadek mask, and that female was full of mischief and joy. She was kind and quick, fascinated by everyone and everything. She craned her neck to look at him. "That's very presumptuous of you, Dusan." His heart missed a beat. "Do you say no, Dusar?" She reached her neck up and he bent his head to meet her. She pressed a gentle kiss to his lips and whispered against them. "I say yes, Maku." He didn't need any further instruction. It was dark when Maku woke, his senses alert. He kept his eyes closed, turning his awareness to his environment, trying to detect what had awoken him. Maral lay next to him, warm and soft, his hand resting on her bare hip. His room was dark and cool, filled with the scent of them. He opened his eyes a fraction but couldn't see anyone. Beside him, he felt Maral tense. Whatever had alerted him had also awoken her. He froze when he felt a gentle brush against his mind, relaxing when Maral whispered to him telepathically. "Do you know what it is?" He focused on her, trying to send his thoughts to her. "No, I can't see or hear anything." He felt her twitch. "You don't need to shout at me. I can hear your mental voice just fine." He squeezed her hip gently in apology. He didn't make a sound, his senses screaming at him that there was a threat. Whatever it was, he was reasonably sure that it wasn't in his bedroom. Maral spoke in his mind. "Do you have weapons in here?" He sent her the mental image of rolling his eyes and felt her amusement. He crept out of bed on soundless feet, standing naked in the dark room. He reached under the bed and threw Maral a bracelet and a small, lethal pulse pistol. She slapped the bracelet on, and it expanded over her naked skin into a form-fitting protective battlesuit. Nice. She held the gun up by her face, alert. He grabbed the second gun. "Where is your suit?" she whispered. "Only have one in here. There's one under your bed as well." He paused. "I'll get another one to keep in here for future sleepovers." "You're just going to take on whatever this is naked." Even her mental voice was scandalized, and he had to clamp his lips tight to stop from laughing. He imagined his stuffiest voice. "My people fought naked in our history, using only our talons. It's traditional." She mentally snorted. "It doesn't mean it's a good idea. You'll have a hole right through you if someone shoots you." He huffed. "There's a strong psychological impact of fighting naked. It impacts the opponent's perception of your confidence." Maral's mental voice hissed. "Can we debate the merits of naked combat later?" Right then, a shadow moved outside. If they hadn't been awake and alert, it would not have been noticeable. Someone was on the balcony on the left outside the door. Maral's voice was grim. "I can't sense them. That means Phalocian, Svobodan, or Malurian." Maku turned to face the window, and the filaments on the back of his neck stood up. "There's someone inside as well, I'm certain of it." Maral's mental voice was cool, practical. "I'll deal with our window friend. You have a look who's inside. If you can, sneak into my room and put on the bracelet." Immediately, his gut rejected the thought of leaving her alone. He fought a short, hard battle with himself, reminding himself that she was a warrior in her own right, and may well shoot him herself if he tried to prevent her from being who she was. "Very well, lady, don't get hurt, or I will be most displeased." Her yellow gaze gleamed in the darkness. "The same goes for you. You are mine. See that you take care of what is precious to me." He met her gaze. "The same goes for you, mate." He crept to the door on the opposite side of the room, which would take him into the little passageway to Maral's chamber. Simultaneously, Maral moved to the window, until she stood exactly in line with where the assassin hid on the other side of the wall. She pressed a hand against the wall beside her. "What are these walls made of?" "Basalt reinforced with space hull-grade titanium." He opened the door a fraction to peer into the hallway, making sure that the passage was clear. "And the windows?" "Laser pulse-resistant shielding. It's not glass, it's an airtight shield." There was a long pause. "So they need to drop the shield to get in?" "Yes," he confirmed. "The household security override is controlled from the main pad in the kitchen, or the central building security complex." He felt Maral cock her head, considering the options. "It's more likely they have infiltrated the kitchen than central security." Yes, her reasoning was sound. If they had infiltrated central security, it would mean a major attack, not this small stealth mission. "How do I open this window?" she asked. "I can do it with my embedded AI. If you're going to stay here for any length of time, we'll need to get you one installed. Just let me know when you want it open. The window shield will disappear." "Does it make a sound?" He sent a negative impression. "No, but there is a blue light strip around the window that will go out to signal the shield is down." "Awesome." Her voice in his head was venomous. "He won't know what hit him." Maku crept along the passageway between the room, senses on alert. He pressed his ear to the doorway to Maral's room and heard the slightest scuff of movement. His heart skipped a beat. Anger flowed through his veins, cold and calculating. They were in his mate's chambers. The sense of violation and outrage was more than he could hold. He needed to inflict punishment on those that had sought to harm his mate. "Are you okay, Maku?" Maral's voice was worried. She had probably sensed his rage. "Yes, I found them. Are you ready?" She hesitated. It warmed his heart when he considered she was probably warring with the same protective instincts that he was. "Yes. Don't get hurt." "Yes, Dussar, I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, idiot." Such violence and protection in her. How he adored her. "I'm ready. On my mark, deactivate the window shield." "Ready." He accessed his AI and connected to the house computer. 3, 2, 1, mark. He complied. Belatedly, he realized that he could have used the house sensors to detect the intruders. Cursing himself for an idiot, he accessed the security feed and confirmed that there were 2 beings in the living area. One more on the balcony outside his mate's chambers, and one inside, hiding in the bathing room that connected to the exterior balcony. He used his AI to lock the ones in the kitchen out of the system, so they had no control over the shields. He brought up all internal shields, cutting the living area off from each of the bedroom wings, and all rooms off from the outside. He also brought up the exterior balcony shield so that those on the balcony could not escape. They would need someone to interrogate once they had cleared the apartment. Fury stole his breath when he realized that there was another in his son's wing. That his sons were not in residence this night made no difference. It was too much. He had been hanging on to his control by a thread at the insult to his mate, but with the threat to his sons, rage overcame reason. With no preamble, he pushed open the door to Maral's quarters and raised his talons. Cowards! They had come to harm his mate and sons. They hid in corners, snuck in at night. They were not warriors. He would destroy them because they were vermin. Caught unprepared by his sudden movement, the intruder in the bathing room got off a single random shot before Maku was onto him. He rushed the male, smashing him into the edge of the large stone tub. Something crunched in the male's back and he heard him cry out and go limp. He picked up the invader and shook him like a rag doll, but he was already dead. Apparently that first rush had broken his neck. Bloodlust unsated, he turned to the balcony. Faintly he heard a distant voice and turned back to the fallen invader. He had an earpiece on. Picking it up, he attached it to his ear and listened. "Come in, Gamma Operative. Report status." "Gamma Operative is out of the game," he replied, his voice a silky rumble. "You have made an error that you will not survive." There was no response. On the house sensor feed streaming into his neural AI, he watched the balcony operative jerk. "You should try to run. You might live a few moments more." The operative's body temperature and heart rate shot up on the security feed, and it tried to retreat to the balcony edge, where he assumed it had some method of escape. The operative was stunned to find the shields up. "No escape now," he purred. "You have dared to come into my home, my palace, and try to harm me and mine. Every action has a consequence." The operative turned in a circle, searching for the security sensors to no avail. They were too well hidden. Deliberately, the operative reached up to the earpiece. "Communications compromised. Go dark." It stripped the earpiece away. Satisfied that the intruder was contained for now, he grabbed the hidden gun and bracelet and let the armor flow over him, then moved towards the living room. Maral met him in the hallway. He examined her but could see no visible injuries. Again his heart warmed to see her do the same. "Two in the living room. They know we are onto them." Maral nodded. "We need prisoners I can interrogate. The one on your balcony did not survive. My apologies, it was clumsy of me." He stroked her hair, resting his hand on the back of her neck. He understood that her fury had made her careless, as it had with him. "We have one, trapped on your balcony. These we can punish." She stepped forward and touched his cheek. "Why are you so angry? What changed?" He pressed his palm against her hand, holding her touch to his face, soaking in her warmth. "They sent warriors to harm my mate and my sons." The rattle in his chest was a deathly warning. "They have crossed a line that they will not survive." Maral smiled ferally. "Let's get them." They stepped into the hallway together, creeping down the dark passage. In the lounge room, Maku used the AI to turn on the lighting so that the intruders were spot-lit. The intruders had been standing at the entrance to the apartment, trying to escape through the door. When the lights came on, they moved back to back, scanning the room for an attack. Maku's AI activated the passage light in the hallway towards his son's rooms, and the invaders instinctively looked towards the light. At the same time, he dropped the shields in their hallway and slipped in silently. Maral took the males down with a precise shot to each of their foreheads. Maral moved to them and removed their face coverings. They were lean, pale-skinned, with dark hair, human template, most likely Svobodan. While he applauded and appreciated her efficiency, his bloodlust remained unsated. It nibbled away at the edges of his control. They had come to harm his family. Next was the male in his son's rooms. The AI told him that the male had taken position just inside their room, where he could shoot anything walking down the corridor. Clearly he was smarter than his colleagues. Maku turned the lights off again to avoid presenting an easy target and considered. "Options?" Maral asked. "We could rush him," he responded. "Someone will get shot," she replied. "Probably one of us." She tapped a finger against her leg as she considered. "We only need a split second. I can probably buy us that." He spun to look at her. "How?" "Svobodans have strong mental shields. If I attack them, it might be enough to distract him for a moment. She didn't meet his eyes. What aren't you telling me? It's hard. There's risk involved. Some Svobodans are stronger than others. No, absolutely not. His response was instant denial, everything in him screaming to protect her. Give me a better option, she insisted. One that doesn't end with one of us being shot. He snarled at her in response, furious that she would jeopardize herself for his sake. Your life is not to be placed at risk. He was appalled when she reached up and smacked him on the forehead. Pull your head out of your ass. I'm a Kadek. I've been a warrior for 50 years. It's a risk, yes, but a calculated one. She gripped the back of his neck and hauled him down for a hungry kiss. It was a clash of teeth and tongues and was fueled by fear and fury. I will not allow some Svobodan to kill me, just when I've found you. There is so much more for us to learn and explore. She stood back and blew out a breath. You need to trust me, as you expect me to trust you. He stood, torn between the desire to stuff her into a cupboard and stand guard, and the truth that she would never ever allow him to do so. That to break her trust that way would damage the bright promise of them forever. Fine, he snarled again. What do you need? Just a few seconds to gather myself. She scowled at him. You disrupt my calm. He snorted with laughter. As it should be. If I make you feel calm, I'm doing something wrong, mate. She took several deep breaths and leaned back against the wall. I can only give you 2 or 3 seconds. When I drop my hand, release the shield and go after him. She closed her eyes and raised her balled fist. 1 breath, 2. He watched her with rapt attention. 3, and her hand dropped. He heard the male shriek in pain, and he released the shield and raced through the hallway, reaching the male as he was shaking his head in agony. Maku raised his talons and raked them down the male's face, ripping away the black covering to reveal the pale skin with blood welling in jagged lines. He swiped his opposite hand across the male's stomach, digging in through the lightweight body armor to his innards and yanking them out onto the floor. He roared as he slashed again and again at the male that had come into his son's rooms, intending to harm them. He heard a noise behind him and he spun, arms up, ready to attack. Instead, Maral walked into his arms. Shh, it's okay, he's dead, we're fine, and he's dead. He panted, red rage still obscuring his vision. As he blinked, he realized it was blood dribbling down his face and onto Maral's shining silver hair. He was covered in it, his hands leaving rusty handprints on his mate where he hugged her. He tried to pull away, horrified at himself, terrified of her response. Maral only held him tighter. It's all right, Maku. Your anger and vengeance, it is a clean thing. This is righteous. He came into your home and threatened your family. He sank to his knees, pressing his face into her stomach as he shuddered, coming down from the battle high. She stroked her hand over his head and shoulders soothingly, just letting him breathe. He wasn't sure how long they sat there before she spoke. Come on. We have one more on the balcony. Call your security forces. We need to interrogate him. Find out how he got onto the planet and into your apartment. She stared impassively at the carnage in the room, the thick plush carpet covered in the cooling entrails and blood. Call a clean-up crew as well. This must be put back to rights before the boys return home. She took his hand and led him out of the room. It took a day to sort out the mess of the incursion. The Royal Security Force was incredibly embarrassed that an armed team had attacked one of their own right under their noses. Predictably, they had taken over the site and kicked them out of the apartment. There was an incredible confrontation between Chromu and the head of the Royal Forces over who would interrogate the prisoner. They had nearly come to blows until the Gustana intervened, instructing in her most imperious voice that the Royal Security Force could undertake the interrogation, and Chromu would observe, noting that it would be instructional for them to understand just how their security measures had been circumvented so easily. As it turned out, it had been laughably easy. The survivor had revealed that he was a mercenary, hired to take out the Dusan and Dusar to prevent the Empire from providing assistance to Dalat. They had paid a Malurian trader to smuggle them in, and simply waited for their opportunity. It was a monumental embarrassment that Maral suspected would result in widespread changes in the Malurian royal city in the short term. It was also too easy. This isn't like the Svobodans at all. They are cunning, detailed opponents. This kind of blunt force attack is more something the Uzbek would do, Maral noted, as she handed the Gustana a plate of sliced cakes to choose from. You're quite right, my dear. Our intelligence tells us that the Uzbek representative, Valhuoz, was severely embarrassed by their failure in the Alliance Council to make their charges against you stick. I suspect that this foolhardy mission was an attempt to get back into the good graces of the Alliance's inner circle." She snorted. "It is stupid. If any harm had come to you or Maku, we would move from simply defending your planet to obliterating the Alliance in its entirety." Maral nearly dropped the plate of cakes in her shock. "Please tell me you don't mean that." The Gustana met Maral's eyes. "I mean every word. The Empire is not particularly aggressive, but we take threats seriously. We traded with the Alliance because peaceful coexistence is always preferable to war, but we are not weak. Our bodies bear the signs of our history, when our ancestors gained dominance on this planet as the most efficient predators." She speared a slice of cake with a razor-sharp talon and brought it to her mouth. Taking a slow bite, she chewed with relish before smiling wolfishly. "Your Alliance has fallen under an incorrect assumption if they believe we would respond with anything other than overwhelming force." Maral swallowed, feeling sick at how close the Alliance had come to obliteration because of one race's stupidity. There are billions of innocent people in the Alliance. Then they should choose better leadership. The Gustana was implacable. Maluriens would never tolerate this kind of failure from a leader. "I thought the Empire believed in primogeniture," the Gustana cackled. "Oh no, dear. Power often passes to the children of powerful families, and our society is somewhat striated. However, that is nurture as much as nature. When a child grows up with parents that serve the Empire, when they are exposed from an early age to the education necessary to progress, it is unusual for them not to take advantage of that and succeed in life." She took another cake as she continued. "Neither Chromu nor Jidu are from powerful families. They distinguished themselves enough to have risen to the highest levels of our society. Maku's sons will be given every advantage in terms of education and opportunity, but they will not inherit his Dusan rank. They must earn their own rank. And when the Emperor dies, the most senior members of the Empire will compete for the right to be the next Emperor. The next Emperor will be chosen from the Dusen and Dusar at the time as the most senior civilian ranks." Maral's eyes widened. "Why not a Gustana? Why can't your rank compete?" She cackled again. "A Gustana is a military rank, not a civil one. Only civil-ranked Maluriens can progress to the throne. Prevents military dictatorships taking power." She winked at Maral. "Who knows, perhaps you or Maku will be our next Empress or Emperor." Maral gaped, and the Gustana snorted with laughter. "You should see your face." Maral shook her head. She wasn't sure she would ever understand Maluriens. "What does a Gustana do in the military?" Maku's mother looked at her as if she was a bit simple. "I lead it, dear." Maku's sons came to see them off at the landing field. All around them, dozens of ships were lifting off, preparing to defend Dalat. The boys were trying hard not to let their fear show, but it broke Maral's heart to feel it seeping around their nascent mental shields. She had barely spent any time with them, had not forged any sort of bond or connection beyond a stiff politeness. But in this moment, she could not go without trying to ease their pain. Maku stood slightly away from them, making last-minute arrangements with the pilot, giving Maral a few moments to speak to the young males. "I promise it won't be long before you can join us on Dalat. You'll like it there. There are lots of forests to run and hunt in." Hulo stiffened. "And if we don't want to go?" "Like your sire said, you can stay here with the Gustana." He nodded, his posture not relaxing. Maral felt for him, sensing his disappointment. All at once she understood what the problem was. "But we will miss you. He will miss you. He spoke of you, you know, on the way here, about his joy at seeing you again. We want you to come with us." "Really?" Sardu's voice was bright with hope. "Really," confirmed Maku, who had joined them. I'm sorry that I've not been here, that my work has taken me away so often. I've missed so much." He reached out to both of his sons, pulling them into a bear hug. "Never doubt that I love you, or how often you are in my thoughts. As soon as it is safe, I will send for you. If you wish to come, we would love to have you." Maral was proud of him, her heart lifting as she felt the boys' hope flutter within them. The pilot called to them, and after a final round of hugs, they boarded the plane. Travel to Dalat seemed both maddeningly slow and terrifyingly fast. Their days were spent coordinating the assault and planning for what would come after. Their nights were spent together. A fearsome beast had grown between them, born that night of the incursion into the apartment, a creation of love and passion and an abiding terror that they would lose or break this new, fragile, cherished thing. They soothed the beast with their closeness, with feverish, passionate coupling and stolen kisses. In turn, the beast grew stronger, bigger, and dug its claws into them even more, until Maral despaired of its hold. "Does this not worry you?" she whispered. They were in a storage closet this time, stealing every moment together they could. "This addiction." "Less talk," he instructed, pulling her in for a passionate kiss. "We are in a storage closet, not even a bed. Someone could walk in at any moment. Let them, I don't care. Maybe they'll learn something." He did something wicked with his fingers that stole her breath. She bit into her forearm to contain her moan of pleasure. "Don't you care that you don't care?" He shackled his hand around her neck and pulled her in for another drugging kiss. "No, I want you. I have you. I've waited my life to feel like this. I won't waste this gift analysing it. Just let yourself be happy." After that, there was no more breath for words. This time they were in the small sauna, off the gym. Maku had gone to exercise when she caught him in the steam room, clad only in a towel. She walked out of the steamy air like a ghost from a tale. He sat on the bench, enjoying the heat. He saw her approach, his eyes on the shimmering silver curls at her nape, skin shimmering in the heat. He groaned. She was glorious, and he was caught by the exquisite pressure, the pleasure, pain as she teased him, deftly peeling her clothes away. After she stood, a small smile on her face, and grabbed her jumpsuit, sashaying away, pleased with herself. He could barely breathe. He adored her so. Her intelligence, her fierceness, her compassion, the wild female hidden beneath the cadet. He was terrified to tell her he was falling in love with her, afraid to break the spell that had fallen over them, knowing that this trip was stolen time. This kind of intensity of addiction could not last. Chapter 14. This means war. The Alliance fleet was arrayed around Dalat. The deep space sensors seeded around the planet streamed constant data. Facing the fleet, forming a perimeter around the planet, was a hodgepodge of ships from different planets. Falosian Daggerkiss, Verit troop transports, and, "Is that an Unor battlecruiser?" asked Maku, peering at a display screen. They zoomed in and confirmed that indeed, it was one of 3 Unor battlecruisers stationed at the planet, along with a handful of other smaller vessels. Maral laughed. "It's Lenora." "What? Lenora cut a deal with the Unor?" Jidu's face was a picture of confusion. Maral shook her head. "I doubt it. Her full name is Lenoriel Unor. Her sire is Dutak Unor, head of Clan Unor. Dutak is a smart being. I'm sure that they saw the way things were going and decided that it would be in their best interests to protect the Zealand." Jidu was still staring at her, his mouth open in shock. "Lenoriel Unor? The person who officiated a part of your wedding was Lenoriel Unor, the Black Valkyrie?" He looked appalled. "There are 7 writs of arrest out for her right now." Maral shrugged. "She has more than made up for her past transgressions." There was a flash of light on the far side of the screen, and another ship sped into sensor range. "Maluriens, god of the mountain! Would you look how fast that thing is? What is that? Does anyone know what species it is?" Jidu muttered to his second-in-command as they frantically flicked through databases. "It's all right. They are with us. That's Casti." Maral turned back to Jidu to watch his expression. "It's an ancient alien sentient ship that bonded to Zira and Odrin." If it was possible for a Malurian to look pale, Jidu would have. "It's functional. You have a functional ancient alien ship." "Yes, like I said, its name is Casti. I've travelled in it," offered Maku helpfully. "It has transport capabilities and the rooms are morphic." Jidu looked at him as if trying to discern if he was the butt of some joke. Maral reached out to Maku on a mental thread. "If your mother's mate has an aneurysm, she will murder us. He's fine. It's an adjustment, that's all." Eventually, Jidu turned back to Maral. "If those are your friends, why am I here then? You can defend that planet without us. Because we need you. We don't need to mount a defense for a one-off period. We need to make the Alliance understand that the universe has shifted, that they are no longer in control, that what we offer now is the only way this goes forward. If we do this right, hopefully no one needs to fight at all." Jidu nodded his understanding. "Can you patch us through to Casti?" "No need." Maral spun round to see a projection of Zira standing beside her. "Welcome, sister. We've been waiting for you, Cadet." Zira looked at something off to the right before glancing back to Maral. I have the others ready to be patched in if you're ready to talk. Maral reached out for Maku's hand and received a squeeze of reassurance. Do it. Within moments, projections of people appeared. Lenora standing next to a Tritora male that Maral presumed was her sire, Dutak Uno, Lucius Day, leader of the Verit warriors on Dalat, accompanied by MakenRoy, representative of the matriarch of Verit, and leader of the Verit delegation on the colony. Her dear friend Gedek Sraya, who she had left in charge of the colony in her absence, and Leela, face-scarred, the leader of the Phalosian Dagger Kiss assigned to the planet, and her sister Amira, representing the planet Phalosia. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here to defend Dalat. She made the introductions to everyone, finishing up with, and my mate, Dusin MakenRoy of the Nuren family, nephew of the Emperor of the Malurian Empire, ambassador to Dalat. There was a silence before Frey laughed, her voice light like silver bells, camouflage for her vicious nature. Kadek, I am impressed. Part of me didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Her eyes held a gleam of admiration, rare for the vicious female. We'll make a mammon of you yet. Her smile tightened. But first we must deal with the scavengers at the door. Excuse me, ladies. Dutak beamed his most charming smile. There are others that wish to participate in this endeavour. I speak on their behalf. There was a pregnant pause before Maral realised everyone was looking at her to respond. It shook her to realise that, by unspoken unanimous agreement, she was in charge. Who might that be? I represent a group of interested species. It is a state secret that you have found Zealan on your little colony, so naturally everyone in this galaxy knows. Let's just say that there are many unhappy with the Alliance's xenophobic policies that would be pleased to support an opportunity to establish a place where we may trade for it more openly. Maral exchanged a glance with Maku, who shrugged his shoulders. No help there. Who are they? I will not agree to anything without knowing who they are. Dutak turned and spoke to someone off of the side, and a list began streaming to their shared link. There were nearly 30 groups itemized, all smaller coalitions, merchant enterprises or single planets. If you are amenable to them joining, you will find their ships waiting in the shadow of the second violet sun. They have been hiding outside of sensor range to provide us assistance. Dutak smiled broadly. There are approximately 200 ships of varying capabilities. They have been placed under my command. Maral caught the gaze of her sister, who nodded once. We thank you for your offer and accept your assistance. We make no promises about preferential terms for trading, but are happy to enter discussions in an open and fair spirit once this is done. Dutak bowed briefly. That is all they ask. Maku looked around. Any more surprises? Very well. The plan is simple. Maral motioned, and Jidu brought up the projection of the colony and the surrounding planets. Amira will give the go-ahead to the Interstellar News Network to release the data we have on the Alliance. We expect it will reduce the Alliance numbers by at least a third, as those planets that have joined because they believe they are doing the right thing understand the magnitude of the betrayal. The projection moved. Thereafter we will bring the Malurian fleet up to the rear, trapping the remaining Alliance ships in between our groups. Maral looked at Dutak. Your fleet should attack here. She pointed to an area on the map. On my signal. When they are caught in between us, we will broadcast our ultimatum. Let us hope that common sense prevails. If not, we will defend this planet. As leader of the most substantial faction, Loren Jidu will coordinate the military defense. I will now hand over to Jidu to provide the details. Jidu set out his plans, with each of the leaders chiming in as needed. It was rough. Jidu said it best. We can plan, but when the battle begins, it will go as it will. The only ship they didn't include in the battle was Casti. They simply couldn't risk the one-of-a-kind vessel receiving damage. Instead, Casti would serve as communications and sensor bridge for all the varying species. When the talking was done, Maral turned to Amira. Sister, it is time. Let's get this done. Release the data. Amira regarded her for a long moment before nodding sharply. Whatever happened now, it was in the hands of the goddess. The news broke, and it was every bit as sensational as they had expected. The Newsnet had been given a day to prepare and had produced a trailer story worthy of a blockbuster drama. It was running on repeat on every news channel in the galaxy. The narrative of the powerful xenophobic alliance conspiring to steal from a poor little colony spoke to a fear shared by most species. Decades of frustration at the alliance's policies came vomiting up, and it was ugly. The galaxy had not seen such a shared outcry since the cancellation of Love Between the Stars. As expected, over a third of the Alliance fleet departed back to their home planets, leaving a fleet of approximately 80 ships behind. Maral and Maku waited in their rooms on the Malurian ship, watching the feed of the Alliance ships fall into formation. For the past hour, there had been increasing signs of activity, and the Dalat fleet had been placed on alert. They lay on the bed, Maral curled up against his chest. "This is it. Whatever happens, we'll get through this." "I know." She wormed her way closer, wrapping her arm around his waist. There was nowhere safer in the world than with Maku. He made her feel centered, made her feel seen in a way that no one else ever had. He didn't want the Kadek or the sister or Maral. He wanted all of her. He saw her, was not afraid of any part of her. "Maku. I'm glad you are my mate." He looked down at her, his heart in his eyes. "And I you. I had never hoped to find what we have." He stroked a gentle touch over her cheek. She licked her lips, suddenly dry. "What is that?" "Wicked female. Will you make me say it?" "Yes, I think so." She needed to hear it. "Love, I adore you, Maral. The warrior, the empath, all of you, I'm your most devoted slave." She tapped him on his nose in reprimand. "Not that, Maku. I have no need of slaves. You are a Dusan. You bow only to the Emperor." She smiled impishly. "Although I will accept you on your knees occasionally." She stroked his cheek in return. "I want a partner, someone to see the universe with." He pulled her on top of him, slowly sheathing himself in her with an ease that spoke to their recent practice. "I think I can do that." He kissed her gently and full of promise. She rocked against him as they gasped together, easy and slow. He stared up at her, stars in his eyes, and opened his inner mental barriers to her and letting his emotions flow unchecked. He saw the moment she felt it, saw her breath catch. "Maku, that's—" She pulled him to her, cradling his face in her hands. "That's too much, too soon, you can't feel that way." He laughed. "How like you, Dusar, to tell me what I can and cannot feel." She laughed, dashing away hot tears. "I didn't expect this. Never." He shushed her, gently dabbing away her tears with his knuckles. "Don't cry, Maral. I didn't mean to make you upset." "I'm not upset, idiot. It's too much. You can't care for me that much." "I do. It's done. There's nothing you can do to change it." The absurdity of his words made her laugh. "I adore you, Maku. I don't know what I thought love was, but never in my dreams could I have imagined this. My imagination isn't this good. I love you." He kissed the tears away from her eyes. "Move with me." He laced their fingers together, and they moved in sync. When they crested, it was gentle and sweet and the most perfect thing in the world. He pulled Maral down to snuggle next to him, wrapping her in his arms as their heart rates slowly reduced. "I don't think I'll ever tire of that," she murmured. "I will endeavour to make sure you do not. In fact, if you wish to go again—" Maral stiffened in his arms. "I would love to. But right now, we need to get to the bridge." Her eyes turned back to the Alliance ships on the view screen. "They have just launched their attack." The battle was short, vicious and brutal. The Alliance ships flew towards the colony to be met by the Phalosian, Verit and Unor ships defending, unaware of the Malurian ships at the rear. As soon as the Alliance was engaged with the defending fleet, the Malurians pounced, launching a volley of remote-controlled stingers that strafed the ships, aiming to take out the large gun arrays and targeting sensors. Next came the larger Malurian vessels, which pounded the Alliance ships, most of which had been reduced to only short-range guns and manual targeting. They got an occasional shot in, but most went wide. The defenders pulled back, leaving an opening towards the second violet sun, and the Alliance fleet moved to fill it, to be met by the hodgepodge of smaller vessels. While they were small, they swarmed with a mess of different armaments. It was impossible to rotate the shields fast enough to account for all the different weaponry. Within minutes of its starting, the Alliance fleet began to retreat, right into the Malurians and the Dalat defense fleet. The entire thing took less than 10 minutes. It was an unmitigated disaster for the Alliance. A mirror streamed it live across the galaxy. Uncounted numbers of beings across the galaxy watched as the Alliance got their collective butts kicked in vivid, glorious detail. When the call for surrender came, it was not unexpected. Adam Leask, Speaker of the Alliance Council, requested a meeting to discuss terms. They agreed to meet on Casti. Maral looked sideways at Zira, who was regarding the room Casti had created with a self-satisfied smile. Really? What? I think it's fitting. Zira smiled angelically, the picture of innocence. I agree, Maku chimed in. Maral sighed. You would. Zira and Casti had recreated the Alliance Council Hall, complete with the half-moon of solid black stone council table, on the sea of white. This half-moon was bigger, to accommodate all the Verit, Phalosian and Malurian representatives that needed to attend. But in every other way, it was identical to the original. Only this time, it was Adam and his allies that were the supplicants. The symbolism was subtle as a brick. Maral sat in the centre, Maku on her right, Amira on her left. Beside Amira was the Dagger Kiss chief Lila and Zira. On Maku's right sat Lucius Day and the MakenRoy. Nearly a dozen other people had wanted to attend, and they had nearly come to blows settling on the list. Ultimately, what had decided it was that it was, first and foremost, about the sovereignty of Dalat. Not the Zealan or the ancient tech, but the planet. When everyone was settled, Maral nodded to Zira. Bring them in. Adam, Nulium of Svoboda and Valhors were transported into the middle of the chamber. Welcome to Casti, gentlemen. Adam looked around, his face darkening as he realized where they were. This is outrageous. You have transporter technology, gasped Nulium, his face ashen at his dawning understanding. He looked around. This is a reproduction of the council hall. You don't have the tech to do this. He trailed off, his voice shaken. You have a functioning ancient ship or station, and you kept it from us. You kept it from yourself, MakenRoy shot back. Your dirty grab for what was not yours has cost you everything. She laughed her silver bell laugh. You will be the only species in the galaxy that will not benefit from this discovery. Nulium looked sick, the full import of the consequence of his failed venture beginning to dawn on him. Maral looked at Adam. We are here to detail the terms of your surrender. Adam. Yes, we would. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. We will dictate the terms and you will agree, or the Malurian fleet will wipe you out. Adam's face flushed red and he clamped his mouth shut. You will withdraw all Alliance personnel and ships from Dalat Colony and the surrounding space, including Phalosia, Verit and all their colonies and stations in the next 12 hours. Adam nodded stiffly. The Alliance cedes all relationship and claim to Dalat. We owe you nothing and you are entitled to nothing. Adam opened his mouth but once again clamped it shut when Maral held up her hand. For 5 years, Dalat will be closed to Alliance representatives. Individual Alliance members may apply to trade with us, and we will consider them on merit, but the Alliance as an entity shall have no embassy ambassador or any formal presence. At 5 years from today, we will reconsider if the Alliance wishes to petition the government of Dalat for an embassy. She glared at Adam. This is a good deal. In the fullness of time, if the Alliance makes no aggressive moves, we will open trade and you will be able to benefit from the discoveries made here. Decide. Adam spluttered, looking around the room for some shred of assistance. There was none. He was met only with the stony expressions of the Dalat representatives. I can't make this decision on my own. This is a one-time offer. You have an hour to decide. We will provide you with a communication station to reach the other Alliance representatives. Adam spluttered again, before reluctantly conceding. Zira, please transport Adam to a comms room and monitor him closely. Yes, Cadet. Adam disappeared in a shower of light. Nulium, representative of Svoboda. Nulium straightened defiantly as all eyes were on him. This community has had some debate over who has the prior claim to your reprimand. Our Verit allies wish to reprimand you for sending your spies and assassins here and putting the life of Dinara and MakenRoy at risk. Nulium sneered at Lucius and Frey. Our Phalosian allies wish to reprimand you for your espionage and your torture of Lenora Una, as do the Unor for that matter. Nulium's eyes widened at that. Maral sniffed, looking down her nose at him. Given the volume of your debt to this group and your architecture of this plot against us, here is our decision. For your attempt to steal this planet from under us, Svoboda and all its colonies, planets and stations are barred from Dalat. Anyone that identifies as Svobodan is barred. You cannot trade with us, buy our research, nor establish your own embassy or research facility here. While I'm sure in the fullness of time you will be able to purchase some crumbs from the table through intermediaries, you will be prevented from benefiting from the most significant advancements in centuries." Maral smiled viciously. "You should also know, the individual groups represented here will pursue their own justice as they see fit." Nulium was aghast. "You will never do it without us. Svoboda has the most advanced research facilities in the galaxy. The best scholars in the Alliance are Svobodan." He sneered again. It appeared to be a permanent expression on his face. "You will be stuck with second-rate scientists. It'll take you centuries just to work out how to turn your lights on." Maku leaned forward, baring his teeth. "You may be the best in the human alliance, but how arrogant of you to assume there are no other scientists in the universe. What about Vulio of the Antaraxan sect, Huyin Alciana, Archguidus of the Ung, Tiskith of Tritara?" Nulium frowned in confusion. Maku laughed. "Typical human alliance. Your thinking is always so small. The universe is a very big place." He leaned forward again. "We don't need you." Maral spoke again. "You are barred. Effective immediately. Return him to his ship." He disappeared in a shimmer, leaving only Valhoise. Maral examined him, weighing her next decision. She was sure her Phalosian colleagues wouldn't agree with what she was about to do, but she was certain of her decision. "Representative of Uzbek, I cede my right to vengeance to my mate, Dusin MakenRoy." Maku jerked in surprise before understanding dawned. He bowed his head to her in thanks and turned his baleful glare on Valhoise. He stood, his coat flaring around him. He stalked around the table, a giant predator hunting. Maku rattled deep in his throat. "Valhoise, you sent assassins into my home. You tried to kill my mate and my sons." His eyes glowed a deep red. "Your life is forfeit." He pounced, his claws flashing as Valhoise leapt backwards, avoiding a swipe aimed at his throat. "Wait, we can make reparations." "Reparations!" Maku roared at him. "There was blood on the floor of my child's room." He launched himself at Valhoise, using his superior weight and size to drive him to the ground. Valhoise twisted onto his knees, trying to scramble away. It infuriated Maku, who gripped his tail of hair and hauled his head back. "Coward!" he hissed into his ear. "I do your ancestors a mercy, removing the stain of your cowardice and dishonor from their line." He sank his fangs into the back of his neck, blood spurting out, and shook him like a rat. The Dalat representatives watched impassively as Maku extracted his revenge. No one flinched when Valhoise's neck snapped, and he went limp. This was vengeance, and should be witnessed. Maku stood and turned to Maral. He walked up to the stone desk stood before her, eyes only for her. He wiped the blood from his face with the back of his arm. "My mate, the injury to our family has been avenged." Maral leaned over the table and grabbed the front of his overcoat, hauling him towards her. She pressed a kiss on his forehead, a benediction. "Thank you, my love." Maman Frey shook her head and pressed her face into her hands. "Oh, Kadek, you've gone and fallen for him, and you were doing so well." Chapter 15. Family. Maral stood in the landing area, resisting the urge to jiggle in her anxiety. In the 6 months since what had become known as the Dalat Independence Battle, Dalat Colony had become almost unrecognizable. The central hub had been relocated to the plateau near where Casti had been found. Instead of the small, carefully planned agricultural program of the original colony design, a large-scale trading and research site had been constructed. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species scrambled around, trading and living side by side. The majority of the planet was still set aside for Verit and Phalosian use. Other species were confined to designated research areas and mining sites. Verit and Phalosia were still determined that their alliance would bear fruit. Even more so because the first child, Dinara and Lucius's infant son, was due in 4 months. With the colony settling, Maku had fulfilled his promise to his sons. They had joined them on Dalat, the first of a small, troublesome pack of young that were growing up semi-wild in the village of the trading station. Speaking of trouble, Hulo and Sardu raced over to her, throwing their arms around her with an easy familiarity. Maku followed behind them, talking with his mother, who was visiting from the Malurian homeworld. "Did we miss her?" Sardu bounced on his toes in excitement. "No, you are perfectly on time. Her shuttle just landed." She pointed out the sleek grey flyer. The ramp unfolded, and at the top of the ramp, Amira stood with a young Phalosian female. She was so tall. Maral's eyes welled up. She couldn't help herself. She raced to the shuttle and embraced Varys, who launched herself down the ramp into her arms. They didn't need words, just held each other. She felt Varys reach for her mind and she opened to her, sharing her love for her, how she had missed her. She shared images of her life with Maku, her love for the boys, her hopes that Varys would like it here, would want to stay. Maku came up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. He dropped his face down to Varys's height and smiled. "Hello, little one. It's nice to meet you in person." Varys's grin was blinding. They had been video calling for months, preparing for this moment. She reached an arm out and wrapped it around his neck, drawing him into the hug, and he engulfed them both in his arms. Maral sighed, her heart welling. She had a colony to run, research deals to negotiate, mining operations to oversee and matings to arrange. But in this moment, her life was perfect. "Hey, remember us," Sadu called, and they broke apart laughing. Varys slipped a hand into hers, and they walked to the boys to introduce Varys to her new brothers. Afterward, "Thank you for listening all. I am an indie author and reviews mean the world to us, so if you enjoyed this audiobook, I'd love it if you could leave a review here. Ebook and print books are available on Amazon, and the full unabridged audiobook can be purchased at rosemackie.com. If you want to share on social media, I'd love it if you can tag me at @rosemackie_author on Facebook, Insta or TikTok. If you really loved it and want to read more, check out rosemackie.com where you can sign up for my newsletter to hear about future books. No spam, I promise. You'll get access to extra scenes, free novellas, and be the first to hear about new releases.